Anthony, good morning. Thank you for joining us on Sunday morning.
Good morning, Santo. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Folks, I'm with Anthony Venuto from InTouch Mortgage Solutions this morning. There's been so much talk and so much information, good, bad, indifferent, about, well, the last few weeks. It seems that there's been a ton. It's almost like it's coming out of a fire hose, a ton of information about changes to housing and making houses more affordable and mortgages and I'm at a loss for words with the amount of information out there. With the budget that came out, they're talking about all sorts of things, and I want to talk about it with you today. Not I don't want to necessarily just read whatever the budget is stated or whatever the rule was, but what does it really mean? Let's just talk about it. So the first thing I want to bring up is they're making changes to capital gains. Who does this really affect, in your opinion?
Uh, In my opinion, there's a lot of implications, obviously, with the capital gains. I'm not a tax expert, nor do I know the tax code proficiently.
Oh, thank you. Let me just jump in. None of us are tax experts here. This is not tax advice. This is not legal advice. Thanks, Anthony. We got to protect ourselves here.
Of course, of course. So, with the tax question around capital gains, obviously, there's the corporation tax or revenue, and then there's the investors, which I think is what they're trying to go after. All those individuals that may own multiple properties. So, just to be clear, for some of our viewers that may have questions, it is only designed, it's not actually applicable to primary residence. So if you own your home and you sell it, it's still status quo. They're not coming after you
Nothing's
for the
changed there
capital gains there. Nothing's changed there yet. We'll see what happens in.
yet. Whoa, we got to come back to the yet. I don't want to forget that. Go on.
Okay, we will come back to it. So, from what we've gathered right now, ultimately for investors, I mean, if you're a seasoned investor, if this is what you do for work and your business, most likely it's under a corporation if you have multiple properties. So, obviously, there's going to be implications there. What I really feel for is the smaller investors, like the mom and pop investors that, try to get a little bit further ahead, put their risk out there, put their capital out there to sort of build a safety net, a retirement safety net for them to subsidize their retirement. I think that's what I'm really feeling for right now. Not the institutional investors, the guys that are treating it as a business. And I really think it's going to go after those individuals, especially if they've purchased properties eons ago. As we know, prices have come up over the last.
Well, that's where the largest capital gains are going to be. You bought 10 years ago, 20 years ago versus someone who bought 2, 3, 4 years ago, right?
Right. There's more equity in there. The government's going to be putting more of
Absolutely.
their hand deeper into your pocket. And I'm sure there's going to be some who sympathize and some who don't sympathize with those individuals. But at the end of the day, what I really feel is the government is trying its darndest right now to make up loss of billions of dollars. But I think they're personally going about it the wrong way, to be honest.
Well,
There could have been other ways that they could have done this.
oh, there's a million other ways, and who knows if any of them would work. But I'm reading the title here of this whole budget, or this whole, I don't even know what you call it, the PDF that the government put out, solving the housing crisis, Canada's plan. Let's, yeah, we started talking about capital gains, but the whole premise of all this is to solve the housing crisis. If we go back a little bit further, and I don't want to make this political, but it's all political. It's all about, whoever's in power now. I don't even want to say it on the channel, but everybody knows whoever's in power now, wanting to stay in power, and they say a ton of stuff to, fluff up everybody's brain with all this, lovely stuff. And so when they talk about capital gains, the image goes to the greedy homeowner, the greedy landlord, and yes, tax them more. But you just said it's not going after the institutional investor that does this for a living. It's really going to affect the mom and pop that scrounge together a few pennies to buy a second property, or maybe they have a cottage and it's going to affect that investor that's trying to organize themselves for retirement. That's really who's going to get beat up with this and have to pay more taxes.
The investor that's got all this money to deploy, first of all, we have a flight of investors in Ontario, and investors, unfortunately, whether you like it or not, they're the ones that generally bring inventory to the market. There is a big cohort of Canadians that unfortunately will not be able to own a home. They need a place, they need a roof over their head, and we can't rely on the government to facilitate this building objective that they've put forward. And so sometimes you have to depend on the private sector to bring inventory to the market to meet the demand. And maybe this is going to be a flight for investors to either come back and say, hey, you know what, now instead of owning 10 properties to cash flow, maybe I need 15 to make up the losses that I'm going to be paying potentially in capital gains. I don't know. I'm just saying this is the ink is still wet on this. It just came out this week. But to your point about solving the housing crisis, obviously the capital gains, you mentioned the optics of how this is perceived by the majority of Canadians. And that is 100% correct. Many people think the greedy, wealthy investor. But, I was just on a webinar yesterday, and, not that it's shocking to me, but high net income earners pay probably more than their fair share of taxes because they make up 34%. They pay the most. They make up 34% of the income in the country, but they pay over 60% of the tax. So this is just a deflection from the current administration to put the blame on the housing crisis on others than say, hey, we messed up. 8 years of our administration has failed to deliver on our promises, and now we're trying to play a game of catch up in the next 2 years before you potentially vote us out.
And that's why you will never get a job as a speechwriter for the government.
I don't want one for the government.
I like
to be able to.
You
Look,
can't say,
as I
wait a
said,
minute.
we don't want to get political, but at the end of the day, I'm always.
I
think everybody. It is this whole agenda, the capital gains, the way they're trying to position everything is the deflection away from their failures. The Minister of Finance, the Prime Minister, they're getting blowback from the business community about these capital gains because it's going to stifle innovation. We are facing productivity concerns of epic proportions in Canada. We had Deputy Governor Carolyn Rogers coming up just a few weeks ago talking about the emergency to productivity. And now you want to penalize businesses and entrepreneurs. And I know there's exemptions for entrepreneurs, but think about businesses that want to invest in some shape, way, or form to get a better return to build that business or to stay in Canada. Absolutely. In Canada, we are not a country that rewards business, unlike the US.
Okay, let's change subject here. Part of the solving the housing crisis. So they've decided it's a good idea to change the amortization from 25 years to 30 years. Now, there's already 30-year amortizations out there, correct? Yeah, so this is only for first-time home buyers, and it's for resale property, it's for new builds only, not for resale properties, and it's for insured mortgages, correct? So let me say that differently or similar. Taking your amortization from 25 years to 30 years. You qualify for this if you're a first-time home buyer. It's a new build, so you can't do this on a resale purchase. And the mortgage has to be insured, meaning you have to be putting down less than 20%. Which also means then it's got to be for a purchase price of under $1 million, right? Okay, so I don't understand. For the first-time home buyer, and the government says we're gonna help you. What this does is make the monthly payments less. Am I right? So the monthly payments are lower when you take the amortization from 25 years to 30 years. So the banks are making more money. Two, the banks are making more money. Two, it's only for new builds. So the builders are happy, right? Nothing wrong with that. They're the ones that have to build these houses. My question on that is, will they? Is this what the builders need to double and triple production? Because that's what we need. We need double and triple production to kind of have a shot at putting more inventory out there. And I think if the government is truly wanting to help, this is also causing, if the first-time home buyer thinks, hey, this is wonderful, my payments will be lower, I don't have 20%, I don't have to wait till I save 20%, I can buy sooner, my payments will be a little bit less because my loan is deferred over a longer period of time or spread over a long period of time. Will it cause a bunch of first-time home buyers that would not be normally buying to jump in and buy new build? And if they do that, if they do jump in, and I'm going to leave you to talk after this. If they do jump in, are builders going to produce more for the demand or bring their prices up? Because they really can't build that quick, that fast. If they decide today, hey, let's get more stock out there, we're going to see it in 10 years from now. We're not going to see it tomorrow.
This is true. I mean, there's a lot of good points you're bringing up. And I believe when you question the motive of the developer and the builder, they want to build homes. That's the bottom line. If you recall, it was the builders. Right. The builders are the ones that were pushing for this 30-year amortization. This is what we know. We know that over the last little while, the builders have been pushing the government and the regulators to allow 30-year amortizations. Because if you think about the budget from a bird's eye view, what's their objective? The biggest spend in this budget is what? Housing, whether it be loans or grants. And yes, the government can make their money back. But the whole push is to get the developers to put that shovel in the ground. Now, the developer, obviously, with this opportunity, seeing, okay, in some of the hotter markets like Ontario and Vancouver, GTA, Greater Vancouver area, sure, the condo market might get, a little bit more attention because generally they're sub 1 million, right? You might get some people that are saying, hey, I can get into a pre-construction now because I can get a 30-year amortization and the numbers jive. On average, if you're looking at a $500,000 mortgage, probably over at let's say 5.25% rate, you're probably over $300 a month difference between a 25 and a 30-year. Then ultimately, you have to think about, like you said, what happens to all this inventory once it's released at a certain price point? They maybe start lower, and then the demand starts to maybe snowball a little bit. Hey, I can buy this because I have to buy new construction. Remember that. It's not for resale. So that person that wants to take advantage of the 30 amortization that doesn't have the 20%, they have zero options but to buy a newly built home. And that builder now has full control over the pricing of what those homes are to start at.
For sure they do. And it's forcing the builder, I think, to build smaller units that are not going to hit the $1 million because those people buying this program won't work for a purchase price of over $999, right? So we're going to have more and more units that families can't live in.
Well, especially when you think about the demographics and the family formations of those that are arriving in Canada. I mean, if you have, they're doing micro condos at 300 and something, 350, sub 400 square feet.
Yeah.
And the other thing is the density, the infrastructure, the roads. I mean, ultimately, that's something that has to be determined. But if you think about the developer building these, I do think it's going to incentivize them to build. But if the numbers at least for the builders and the developers that we talk to, if the numbers don't compute, the numbers just don't compute. At least in Ontario. I'm not saying that, elsewhere in the other provinces that it won't work, because other provinces are doing extremely well. Look at Calgary, look at Alberta.
I'm only concerned about GTA, not even Ontario, GTA.
Well, what it's a good comparison because there's the price points, right? I just want to make this point very clear to our viewers. Is it smoke and mirrors? I'll let the viewers answer that question because we talked to other colleagues across Canada and outside of most of BC and Ontario, insured mortgages make up 90% of their portfolio because the
Wow.
prices are below a certain threshold and their incomes. Think about it. If you're buying a $500,000 property, you can put $20,000 down. What do you need as an income to qualify? 80 grand, 85, 90 grand household income
20%
versus
down.
here.
Sorry.
Yeah, if you're putting 20% down,
Yeah.
right? Or even less than 20% down, right? The income required to fit an insured model outside Ontario, this is going to be a big feat for the builders to try and bring this inventory to market. And it just begs one question. We're already having pushback with some of the lenders on the size of these units. Is it going to be a future problem to get financing with these smaller and smaller units? That's a great question. I mean, we're seeing some pushback. Some lenders want to do it. Some lenders on the alternative space may not. Some clients that purchase these units, they're going to face some problems.
I'll say, no, there won't be pushback. I'll say that I'm going to go on the limb and say, if the banks can figure out how to make money with this, and there's lots of them, they're happy to do it. If the government said 45 years amortization, the banks would be excited. So would the builders, so would everybody. And I just see this as more of a focus on demand, making homes, it's not making the home more affordable, actually. Well, it kind of is, but in through the back door. It's not, the purchase price is not being affected by this. If anything, there's an argument for, yeah, there's an argument for this is going to create more demand, which could bring those $700,000-800,000 condos to $999. It's unbelievable. This is the part that drives me crazy.
What you could have got for 700,000, maybe you got 650 square feet. Now that $700,000 price point is only going to get you 350 square feet.
Right.
So now you can
Right.
cram more units within the same square footage.
Right.
More profit for, or more margin for the builder.
Exactly. Okay. So the other thing that's going to solve the housing crisis, Canada's plan, has to do with mortgage fraud. That's a big component. So I've got, some of my notes here. They're going to be looking at, I don't know if it's when they're putting this into effect, but they've got this incredible breakthrough that they're going to allow the mortgage institutions that are giving out this money to actually verify people's income based on their CRA return. Could you imagine that it's taken, I don't know, the life of Canadian history here to actually allow mortgage institutions to verify income based on CRA? Like, wow, it's such a modern new way of thinking. I'm being a bit sarcastic here, buddy.
I know. It's interesting because we're also watching a government right now drop billions of dollars in artificial intelligence. So does this coincide with, what they're trying to do with CRA? Is it trying to crack down on mortgage fraud or make sure that everybody pays their fair share of this fairness? That's the question right now, right? So I know there's a lot of people that are full guns ho for the technology, and if used properly, we've been big advocates for this particular reason for first-time home buyers, to level the playing field and create an environment that we don't see that much fraud, right? Because here's the reality: if you're self-employed or commission or whatever the case is, and you're filing your income, that's what the bank is going to use, that they're going to validate. So you can't falsify that paperwork unless you're falsifying your submissions, right? With the governments right now, I mean, there's a lot of questions. I get a lot of, comments, a lot of emails saying, do we want the government to really know more about us? Like about what we're doing, what we're claiming, ultimately they understand that. But this is the question right now is there's too much right now?
So as far as someone who's self-employed, I'm self-employed. You're self-employed. our goal legally to pay as little tax as possible. Legally, because you could do that in fraudulent ways, but using the legal system, what we're allowed, not allowed to do, we have accountants that help us to pay as little tax as possible. There's certain expenses you could write off, things like that. So that's the goal. That's everybody's goal, to pay as little tax as possible. Again, I'll say legally. But if you do that, you're showing as little income as possible on your CRA reports. And so then later trying to qualify for the mortgage is complicated, because you're paying less tax as possible, but that means your net income is as low as possible within the rules. Again, I keep stressing that, but it makes it harder to qualify for a mortgage. So to qualify for a mortgage, you actually got to pay more taxes to bring your income up. You can't write off what you would normally want to or be able to write off. It's for self-employed, it's tough. You really have a hard time, and everybody goes after, these self-employed, and they're so greedy and they want to make so much money. It's a different world. It's a different playing field, different rules, self-employed versus an employee. But the government now is going to, let's just get something straight. Are they not looking at the CRA returns right now when it comes to qualifying people for their mortgage?
Santo, they're looking at the CRAs. If you're self-employed, they're looking at what your income taxes are, your T1 generals, your notice of assessments. If you're, if you're applying for a mortgage as a business owner, your financial statements. The banks are looking at it, not CRA. The banks are looking at it.
The banks, yes, because they're the ones lending the mortgage money, right? So who does this affect then?
Well, it's definitely going to affect business owners, but I really think in the broader picture, like anyone that's, trying to maximize on, as you mentioned, legally paying less taxes. You brought up the very valid point. Let's call a spade a spade. It doesn't matter if you're self-employed or not self-employed. Nobody wants to pay more than their fair share of tax, right? If anybody sits there and tells me I want to pay more tax, I've never heard that, right? Everyone's trying to legally make sure that they don't get audited. They just want to pay. And like myself as a business owner, my account says the same thing. You make the money, you pay the tax, and that's fine. That's 100% correct. But like you mentioned, for self-employed people, the biggest problem with commission is the expenses. The less income you show, the harder it's going to be to qualify. Now, with all this sort of transpiring, is it actually to avoid mortgage fraud, or is it to make sure that people that are trying to buy a home are increasing their income tax requirements? Like, are they bumping themselves up? A lot of times, especially around tax season, we're just in it. A lot of our clients that are self-employed, they're like, we need to qualify for a mortgage. What do we need to do? I'm like, between the accountants, we're having these conversations saying, hey, what's the maximum amount of money you can show? Yeah. Like, what is it that you can show? Because if you want to qualify, we need to work with those numbers.
And it's a balancing act. How much do I want to show, but how much tax do I want to pay? The more you show, the more tax you're paying.
The more you pay, of course. So I think this fraud, the fraud is a really good component. As I said, I'm not going to take away this from the plan, because I really think, as I mentioned, anytime you can level the playing field across the board for buyers that are doing it the right way. This is something that's very important. We've talked about fraud many, many times. If you can, someone who's doing it the right way, they should have the right chance, the right shot at buying the same home and not competing against someone who's falsifying their documents. And I think this is just a really good way to verify. Now, one quick thing is what happens to individuals. I was thinking about this is, yeah, you're self-employed, whatever the case is, you're commission-based, there's not really much you can do. That's based on what you're claiming. But let's say you're a salary or hourly employee and you maybe change career paths, or you've gone from a menial job to a more, prestigious income job, for example, within that calendar year or outside that calendar year. It's not going to generally, how is it going to impact them? Generally, for salaried or hourly people, As long as we can validate the job letter and the pay stubs, then we're just using the T4s and NOAs as continuity, right? So this is, I think, just a backstop as well to actually make sure that, hey, you are in this line of work, you've made this amount of money, then we're good. But if you've gone from position A to position B within the company, but you've gotten a $20,000, $30,000 bump income, right? It's not going to be based on last year's income.
No, and it won't be in your tax return yet, because that's, 6
Okay,
months.
so does that
mean that, right? So the person doesn't have to wait till the next year's filing to sort of buy a home, because from your experience and my experience, a lot of times when Canadians get to that point where they can afford a house and they got the savings, like how many times you worked with clients that are like, hey, I just got promoted, I'm past probation, let's go buy a house now.
Absolutely, it happens. So this is more to me, because so when we talk about, if you listen to the people there saying, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to combat mortgage fraud, there's a lot of listeners on this channel, there's a lot of the public that are thinking, great, thank God, we're going after the people cheating the system. But if somebody was to ask me, if they were to pull me up to one of these news conferences and say, Santo, quick, without thinking about it, how would you combat mortgage fraud? You know the first thing that pops into mind? Jail time. Realtors that are involved in this should go to jail. Mortgage brokers that are involved with this should go to jail. Mortgage bank managers that are involved with this should go to jail. Lawyers that are involved with this should go to jail. Everybody involved, the actual borrower that's benefiting from this fake documents that they submitted or whatever, should go to jail. But nobody's yet talking about that at all. What's your thought on that? You think these people should go to jail?
I say hang them at high noon. And like literally the whole book should be thrown at them. I agree 100%. They shouldn't just be able to, walk away scot-free. We've seen it happen with banks. We've seen it happen with representatives, realtors. We see it all over the news. They just get their license revoked or suspended, or they pay a fine, and then they end up operating under somebody else who's going to take them on and give them the business.
Because they bring in lots of business. That's the problem.
So I don't know, I think another good point to prevent the fraud, at least from the mortgage perspective, the real estate education path, it's changed over the last little while. But I think the barrier to entry for brokers should be, stretched out. I think there should be a longer program. We have every 2 years we have to do continuing education, which I think should be a little bit more stringent. We had to go through a private mortgage course that everyone had to pass in order to actually be able to sell or talk about private mortgages, for that matter. I think the barrier to entry for a lot of these professions, especially in our industry, needs to be really taken seriously. It's not just for someone who wants to go there and make a quick buck. That's the problem. The bad apples, the bad actors ruin it for the people that actually physically care about the well-being of their clients.
I agree. Anthony, we're out of time for today. My blood just boils every time we talk about this stuff. I just see it as all fluff. You say smoke and mirrors. I just see it as most people have no idea that none of this stuff I don't see really making a difference, but might be good for a few votes. Anyways, thank you for your time today. As always, your company, InTouch Mortgage Solutions, you guys do a phenomenal job. Take a second and introduce your company, please.
Thank you very much, Santo. Yes, just to end off on that note, my blood boils too. And I believe all this stuff takes a little bit of time for it to come to fruition. So don't get our hopes up too fast. But, InTouch Mortgage Solutions, we're a boutique brokerage. We specialize in helping our clients one-on-one, giving them the proper advice, walking them through the whole process as first-time home buyers. So I appreciate, having me working with us. We appreciate our synergy. You can find us on, either you're looking on the internet, find us at InTouchMortgageSolutions.com, on social. You can find us on our YouTube channel, Finance Fridays, at InTouch Mortgages, on Instagram, _Venuto, or at InTouch Mortgages. We're all over, right? So social media.
You can't hide, Anthony. They know how to get you. We'll have your contact details in the description below.
Thank you very
Thanks.
much, Santo. It was a pleasure to be on.
Thanks, Anthony. Have an awesome day.
You too.